Caleb Dawson pressed the barrel of his rifle against the chest of a man twice his size, jaw locked, voice quiet as stone. "Tell me where she is right now." The man laughed. So Caleb cocked the hammer. The laughing stopped. For 5 days, the entire United States government, 3 private rescue corporations, and 47 search teams had combed the Colorado wilderness, looking for billionaire Elena Whitmore, and found nothing. It took one heartbroken single dad with a busted truck and a compass to find her alive. But saving her? That was only the beginning of the nightmare. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button right now, because this story is only getting started. The call came at 4:47 in the morning, not to Caleb Dawson directly. He didn't have the kind of phone that received important calls. He had a crack-screen Samsung that Lily had decorated with horse stickers, and it mostly received reminders about veterinary appointments, and the occasional text from his neighbor Dale about fence repairs. No, the call came over the old emergency scanner that Caleb kept on the kitchen counter because his late wife, Sarah, had insisted on it when they first moved out to the edge of Routt County. "We're 40 minutes from the nearest fire station, Cal," she had told him, setting the scanner down on the counter like she was placing a crown jewel. "We keep that on always." She had been gone for 4 years now, but Caleb still kept the scanner on. Always. So at 4:47 in the morning, while Lily slept down the hall and the horses shifted restlessly in the barn, Caleb heard the words that would change the direction of every remaining day of his life. "Command, this is Team 7. We've completed our sweep of grid sectors 9 through 14. No signs of life. No wreckage beyond the confirmed debris field near Elk Ridge. Recommend we transition search parameters to recovery protocol." Over a pause, static, then a tired, older voice. "Copy that, 7. Stand by for Central Command authorization." Caleb stood at the kitchen counter in his flannel shirt and wool socks, coffee mug halfway to his mouth, and felt something happen inside his chest. Not grief exactly, not anger, something colder than both. He set the mug down. He looked out the window at the dark outline of the tree line, half a mile east of the house, black against a sky that hadn't decided yet whether it was night or morning. 5 days. He had been listening to the scanner every day since the Whitmore aircraft went down. The whole country had been watching. Elena Whitmore, the Elena Whitmore, founder of ClearPath Energy, the woman who had built a renewable energy company from a borrowed garage into a $3 billion operation in under a decade, had vanished somewhere over the northern Colorado Rockies. Her private Cessna Citation had dropped off radar at 6:23 p.m. on a Tuesday, and the debris field they found 2 days later told a story that search professionals did not find encouraging. Fire damage, impact scatter across a quarter-mile radius. Pieces of fuselage folded into shapes that didn't leave much room for optimism. But they had found no body. That detail had been eating at Caleb since day one. No body. He had worked as a wilderness guide for 9 years before life pulled him off the mountain and planted him behind a fence line. He had led search operations in conditions that made the current one look manageable. And in all that time, across everything he had seen and done in these forests, one truth had never changed. The mountain keeps what it takes. If she was dead in that debris field, they would have found her. Pieces of her. Something, the fact that they had found nothing meant one of two things. Either the body had been moved by animals, by water, by someone, or Elena Whitmore had walked away from that crash site on her own 2 feet. Caleb believed the second one, not because he knew her. He'd seen her face on news websites the same as everyone else. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, the kind of expression that looked like it had never once considered the possibility of failure. She looked like someone who would crawl through broken glass and bleeding before she lay down in the snow and accepted defeat. He believed she had walked because the mountain told him. That was the part nobody outside a certain kind of life would ever fully understand. There was a language in the wilderness not mystical, not romantic, just real, that revealed itself to people who had spent years paying attention. A bent branch meant weight passed through at speed. A disrupted animal trail meant something large had moved through at an unusual hour. A particular angle of disturbed snow told you which direction and roughly how long ago. For 5 days, Caleb had been driving his truck to the edge of the permitted search zone, parking on the old logging road that the rescue teams didn't bother with because their satellite imaging had already ruled it out, and walking, just walking. reading the land the way his grandfather had taught him to read it, the way his years of guiding had sharpened into something close to instinct. He had found things. Small things. Things that wouldn't mean anything to someone studying a map in a command center 40 miles away. But things that, when you laid them in sequence, the broken pine bough at shoulder height, the disturbed creek bank on the far side of a ravine, the single boot print pressed into frozen mud at the edge of Sector 12's boundary told a story. Someone was moving slowly, moving badly, but moving southeast, away from the crash site, away from the search perimeter, toward the lower elevation, where the cold was slightly less lethal. When the radio traffic shifted that morning toward recovery protocol, something in Caleb solidified. He turned away from the window. He walked down the hall to Lily's room and pushed the door open quietly. She was 9 years old and she slept like the dead, one arm thrown over her face, her dark hair tangled against the pillow. She had her mother's jaw and her mother's stubbornness and a way of watching the world that sometimes made Caleb's chest ache so badly he had to leave the room. He stood in the doorway for a moment, then he went to wake Dale. Dale Merritt was 63 years old, had worked cattle his entire adult life, and deeply resented being roused before sunrise for any reason short of an animal emergency. He appeared at his door in a quilted vest, pajama pants, and an expression that suggested he was calculating the precise minimum number of words required to communicate his displeasure. "It's 5 in the morning," Dale said. "I know, you look like you haven't slept." "I haven't." Dale looked at him for a moment. Then he looked past him at Caleb's truck, idling in the driveway, the bed loaded with a pack, climbing rope, a medical kit, and the emergency beacon Caleb had been carrying every day for a week. "The Whitmore woman," Dale said. "It wasn't a question." "They're calling off the active search, I heard." "She's still out there, Dale." Dale was quiet for a long time. The cold came off the fields in low waves, carrying the smell of pine and cattle, and the particular kind of silence that belongs only to mountain country before the sun rises. "You're going in alone," Dale said finally. "Lily's still asleep. She'll be up by 7. "Caleb, I know where I'm going. I know what I'm looking for." Caleb met the old man's eyes. "I'll be back by noon. If I'm not, you call Sheriff Briggs and tell him Sector 12, Southeast Ridge, below the old Halverson fire break." Dale rubbed the back of his neck. He looked at Caleb the way a man looks at another man when he knows argument is physically useless. "You are the most aggravating neighbor I have ever had," Dale said. "And I had a neighbor for 11 years who played accordion." "I appreciate that. Go." Dale waved him off. "I'll sit with the girl. Go find your damn billionaire." Caleb drove the old logging road as far as the truck could manage, which was about 1.5 miles before the frozen ruts defeated his front axle's patience. He parked behind a stand of Douglas fir, shouldered his pack, and started walking east in the dark. He moved without a headlamp. He didn't need one. He had walked this ridge in daylight 6 times in 5 days, and he knew the terrain the way you know, the layout of a house you grew up in, not by thinking about it, but by simply moving through it. The temperature was 11 degrees Fahrenheit. The sky was still black above the tree line, but the eastern edge was showing the faint pre-dawn gray that serious cold produces in high country, not a warming color, but a sharp, glassy light that makes everything look like it might shatter. He moved southeast, past the broken pine bough, past the disturbed creek bank. He stopped at the edge of a narrow drainage, a small gully that ran between 2 ridges, dense with scrub oak and the remnants of last year's undergrowth. A search helicopter had passed over this drainage twice. Caleb had been there when it happened, watching from the tree line, watching the helicopter move over the gully without slowing. From above, the drainage was invisible. The scrub oak canopy closed over it completely. From the ground, if you knew what to look for, there was a faint trail of broken stems and pressed snow leading down into it. He followed the trail down. The gully was maybe 15 feet wide, bordered by rock on both sides, dark even now that dawn was beginning to gray out the sky above the trees. He moved carefully, his boots finding purchase on the frozen ground, his eyes scanning the shadows. He almost missed her. She had pulled herself between 2 boulders, at the base of the north rock face, partially covered by a space blanket, the emergency kind, silver on one side, orange on the other, that she had pressed against the rock face, with the orange side inward, hiding the reflective surface. She had reversed it deliberately. She had made herself invisible from the air. That was the detail that stopped Caleb cold. She hadn't been hiding from rescuers. She had been hiding from someone else. He stopped 6 feet away and studied the silver shape for a moment. It wasn't moving, but it was too intact, too deliberately arranged, to be anything but a person who had chosen this position rather than collapsed into it. "Hey," he said. His voice was quiet, not loud enough to carry up the gully walls. "Nothing, I'm not a threat." He unzipped his jacket slowly, letting both hands stay visible. "I'm a neighbor. I live about 7 miles west of here. I've been looking for you for 5 days. A sound. Small, like the intake of breath before speech. Then a voice came out from between the boulders, rough as gravel, stripped of everything that wasn't absolute necessity. "How many of you?" "Just me. Prove it." He looked up the gully. He looked down. He turned a slow full circle so she could see he was alone. "Name," the voice said. "Caleb Dawson. I'm a rancher. Former wilderness guide. I'm not part of any official search team. I have no affiliation with any organization. And I drove here in a truck with a broken heater because I was listening to a scanner and couldn't convince myself you were dead." Silence. Then the silver blanket moved. She came out slowly, not because she was cautious, Caleb realized immediately, but because her right leg was not working properly. She emerged from between the boulders in a controlled sideways drag that spoke of someone managing severe pain with the last of their reserves, unwilling to appear helpless even at the moment of being found. She was smaller than the photographs made her seem. The photographs of Elena Whitmore were composed, lit, engineered. This woman was filthy, frost-burned along the left side of her face, wearing one boot and one improvised wrapping of emergency blanket material, around her right foot where the boot had presumably been cut away. She had a gash above her left eye that had stopped bleeding but hadn't been cleaned. And her eyes were Caleb had to recalibrate when he looked at them, because they were not the eyes of a woman who had been broken by 5 days alone in 11-degree wilderness. They were the sharpest eyes he had looked into in years. "Caleb Dawson," she said. She said it the way you say a name you're filing away for later use. "Yes, ma'am. Are you armed?" "Hunting rifle on the pack." "The people looking for me." She stopped. Something moved through her expression. Not fear. More like the controlled acknowledgement of fear. "The people looking for me are not looking to rescue me." Caleb crouched down to her level. He pulled a protein bar from his jacket pocket and held it out. She looked at it for 1 second, then took it from his hand and ate half of it in a single bite that told him everything he needed to know about the last 5 days. "I figured that out 2 nights ago," he said. Her eyes cut to him. "What?" "The vehicles that came past the logging road. 3 trucks. No markings, but the equipment was coordinated. They weren't searching in a search pattern. They were clearing a grid. That's not rescue behavior." He reached into the pack and pulled out the medical kit. "Your leg." She looked at her wrapped foot. "I think it's a fracture. Mid-shaft fibula. I've been keeping it immobilized." "You diagnosed your own fracture." I looked it up before my phone died. "A beat. The ghost of something that might, in another life, have been dry humor. I have a very good memory. Can you walk on it?" "I can walk on it, with help, if necessary." She said it the way people say things they have decided are not open to negotiation. Then she looked at him directly. "Mr. Dawson, the people who are looking for me, not for rescue purposes, they know approximately where I am. I've been moving every 12 hours to avoid them. I have maybe," she glanced at the sky, "6 hours before they recalculate my position and move in. Then we need to move in 4. Caleb pulled out a thermal wrap and handed it to her. "Can you tell me what happened?" She wrapped the thermal around her shoulders. Her jaw was set tight, working against a shiver she was refusing to let become visible. "The aircraft," she said. There was an explosion. Below the passenger compartment, toward the fuel lines. It was not mechanical failure. What was it? It was deliberate. She looked at him. "Somebody on my team arranged it." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "How many people know you're in this drainage?" "Nobody, as of last night. But they know the general radius." Her eyes were steady. "If your truck is parked on the logging road, I parked it behind the fur stand. It's not visible from the road. When you leave, they might track it. Then we won't go out the way I came in." He stood up, pulled the pack onto his shoulders, and reached down to offer her his arm. "There's an old mining access trail about 2 miles north. It hasn't been on any map since 1987. It comes out on a county road that nobody uses in winter." She studied him. This look was different from before, less assessment, more something she wasn't used to experiencing. She looked at his arm the way someone looks at a hand offered by a stranger they've decided, against their better judgment, to trust. She took it. You knew about the trail before you came here, she said. Yes, you planned your exit before you found me. I planned 3 exits, he said. Hoped I'd get to use one of them. They started moving up the drainage together, Caleb steady and deliberate. Elena working her fractured leg with the grim, controlled economy of someone who had made a private agreement with their own pain and intended to honor every term of it. Why are you doing this? She asked, not aggressive. Genuinely asking, Caleb helped her over a root cluster. He didn't answer right away. My daughter asked me something once, he said finally. She was 6. We'd driven past a car accident on the highway, and she'd watched me stop to help before the ambulance arrived. Later that night, she asked me, Dad, if someone needed you, would you always help them? Elena said nothing. She was listening. I told her yes. He glanced at her. I try not to make a promise to that kid that I don't keep. They moved in silence for a moment. Then Elena Whitmore, woman who had built a billion-dollar company, who had been hunted through the Colorado wilderness for 5 days, by people she had once trusted with her life, said something quietly that she would later admit she had never said to anyone. I forgot what that was like, she said. Someone keeping their word. Above them, the sky shifted from gray to the first pale silver of genuine dawn. They had 4 hours. They started walking. The mining trail was worse than Caleb had described it, and better than either of them had a right to expect. Caleb had found the trailhead 7 years ago on one of his solo surveys of the Eastern Ridge, a habit he had maintained even after leaving guiding professionally, because the land around his property was part of him in the way that some things are part of a person not by sentiment but by cellular memory. He had walked every path within a 10-mile radius. He had cataloged water sources, shelter points, and natural concealment the way other men cataloged stock portfolios. Sarah had called it his obsession. He had called it his homework. Right now, it was the difference between getting Elena Whitmore out alive and not. They moved north through the scrub oak. Caleb's arm steady under her left shoulder, her right hand on the rock face when it was available. She didn't make sounds when the fractured leg sent pain through her. She breathed instead, these short, controlled exhales, and kept moving. He watched her do it for the first 20 minutes and felt a complicated kind of respect develop for her that had nothing to do with the money or the name. Tell me about your company, he said. Not because he particularly needed to know, but because he'd learned long ago that people in pain do better when they're talking. She glanced at him. Clear path. Yeah. What do you want to know? Whatever you want to tell me. A pause. Then I started it in my cousin's garage in Denver. 2 employees. We were building a modular solar array system that could be deployed in communities that couldn't afford traditional grid infrastructure. She navigated a step over a log with his help. 14 years later, it's a $3 billion operation with contracts in 11 countries. That's a long way from a garage. Yes, something shifted in her voice. And somewhere along that road, I stopped paying attention to who I was letting into the building. The executives who arranged the crash, 3 of them. I know who they are. I don't have proof. She looked straight ahead. Yet, what was the motive? There's a merger deal. $12.4 billion. My signature is required for it to proceed, not just legally, but by the original shareholder agreement I wrote when I founded the company. I specifically designed it that way so no deal of that magnitude could happen without me. She paused. I apparently made myself too important to be voted out, and too inconvenient to be argued with. Caleb thought about that for a moment. So they decided the easiest solution was to make me not exist. Her voice was flat. Yes. He didn't say anything for a while. Then, do you have the evidence you need? Somewhere safe? She was quiet. Then I had a hard drive in my carry-on bag. I'd been documenting the irregularities for 3 months. If it survived the crash, the debris field is inside the active search perimeter. Still secured. She turned to look at him sharply. How do you know that? I've been listening to the scanner since day 1. He held a branch back for her to pass beneath. The search teams flagged several pieces of equipment from the wreckage. Standard crash investigation procedure. They're locked in an evidence tent at the command center. So the hard drive might still be there. Might be. She processed this. He watched her file it away. Watched the way her mind worked through it systematically even now. Even in this condition, broken leg. 5 days of exposure, moving through frozen wilderness in 1 boot, and an emergency blanket. She did not compartmentalize panic by suppressing it. She compartmentalized it by converting it into problems she could solve. He found that he understood that. He had done the same thing after Sarah. "You're not what I expected," Elena said. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. The mountain men on television are usually more weathered." "I'm plenty weathered," he said. "It's cold and I'm wearing 3 layers." That sound came out of her again, not quite a laugh, but in the neighborhood of one. They were making decent time. The mining trail opened up slightly as they moved north, the terrain becoming less technical, the rock faces giving way to a corridor of mixed pine and aspen that Caleb could navigate in his sleep. His shoulder was beginning to ache under her weight, not because she was heavy, but because the angle was wrong, and he was compensating with his back, but he didn't shift her because the rhythm they'd found was working, and he didn't want to interrupt it. At the 40-minute mark, he stopped. He stopped so suddenly that Elena caught herself against him, and he steadied her with both hands, turning her sideways toward the tree line in one quiet motion. "Don't speak," he said, "just a sound, not words." She obeyed instantly. He felt her go still beside him, felt her read his posture and go completely quiet, the way people go quiet when they understand the situation without being told. He listened. In the forest, sound travels in layers. Wind is the top layer, and below that is animal movement. And below that is the particular quality of silence that a forest produces when something human has entered it and disturbed its natural acoustic texture. Caleb had been listening to forests his entire adult life, and he had learned to read that bottom layer the way a musician reads beneath a melody to the bass line. Something had entered the forest to the west. Multiple somethings. 2 minutes later, he heard it distant, low, directional, the sound of a boot on frozen ground. Then another. Then a voice pitched low, clipped, the kind of voice that belongs to someone with a radio earpiece and a task. They were not search and rescue. He knew the difference. "Move," he said into Elena's ear. They moved. The last mile to the mining trail exit was not a mile Caleb would recommend to anyone with a fractured fibula and 3 layers of frost on their clothing, but Elena Whitmore covered it without asking him to stop once. He had stopped pretending he wasn't impressed. He had also stopped pretending he wasn't scared, because the men in the forest were moving parallel to them now, adjusting direction, which meant they weren't searching randomly. They had something, a tracker, a signal, a pattern projection from someone analyzing his movements, and they were cutting off the exit. He changed direction without explaining. Elena tracked the change and adjusted beside him. She had stopped asking questions she didn't need answers to, which made her, operationally, one of the better people he had ever moved through difficult terrain with. "There's a service road," he said quietly as they moved. "It's not on your mining trail. It's on mine, your mining trail. I found 2 of them. Figured having a backup to the backup was worth the extra walk." He glanced at her. "You're doing well. I've been telling myself that for 5 days. How's the leg?" "Terrible. Irrelevant." She held his gaze for half a second. "Keep moving." He kept moving. The service road was a quarter-mile cut through second-growth forest that had been used briefly by a timber operation in the mid-90s and then abandoned when the land was reclassified. It emerged from the tree line at a point on County Road 114 that Caleb was reasonably certain no one was currently watching, because it required knowing that the road existed, and the only way to know it existed was to have walked the land the way Caleb had walked it. They broke the tree line at 7:22 a.m. The sky was fully light now, cold and clear. The mountains rose to the west, immense and indifferent, touched at the top with the first gold of a sun that was still below the eastern horizon. Caleb pulled out his phone. He called Dale. Dale picked up on the first ring. "I've been standing here holding my coffee for an hour and a half." "I've got her," Caleb said. "I need you to drive my truck. Do not take the logging road. Come out on 114, heading east, where the timber cut used to be." A pause. "You found her." "I found her. Is she?" "She's standing next to me." He looked at Elena. She was leaning against a pine tree, her weight off the fractured leg, her eyes sweeping the road in both directions. She looked like a woman who had not stopped being a problem solver for 5 consecutive days. "She's okay. She's going to need a hospital, but she's okay." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Dale said. Then, quieter, Caleb. "They're saying on the scanner." "I know what they're saying. The official search is over. I know that too." He looked at Elena again. "Dale, the men in the forest, they're not rescue. Call Briggs. Tell him I've got Elena Whitmore at the 114 timber cut, and tell him to come quiet and come ready." Dead silence. "Then Lord Almighty," Dale said. 20 minutes, Caleb said, and hung up. He stood there for a moment, with the phone in his hand. The mountains behind him, the road in front of him, the woman beside him, who had been failed by the most expensive and sophisticated rescue operation the state of Colorado had ever assembled, leaning against a pine tree in one boot, looking at him with those sharp, exhausted eyes. "Your neighbor," she said. "Dale, good man. You have a good neighbor and a daughter who asks you hard questions." She looked at the road. "That's not nothing, Mr. Dawson." "No," he agreed. "It's not." They waited in silence. The sun came over the eastern ridge. The cold stayed brutal and didn't apologize. And 7 miles away, in a direction neither of them could see, 3 men in unmarked trucks were calculating a grid and coming to a conclusion they didn't know yet was wrong. They hadn't found Elena Whitmore. A broke rancher with a cracked screen phone and a compass had gotten there first. And the story of exactly how dangerous that made the next 24 hours was only beginning to reveal itself. Dale's truck appeared on County Road 114 at 7:41 a.m., moving faster than a 63-year-old man with bad knees had any business driving on frozen asphalt. It slid slightly on a patch of ice near the timber cut, corrected itself, and came to a stop 10 feet from where Caleb and Elena were standing. Dale stepped out. He looked at Elena Whitmore the way a man looks at something he wasn't entirely sure he believed until he saw it with his own eyes. Then he looked at Caleb, then back at Elena. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "Well," he said. That was all he said for about 4 seconds. "Well, Dale," Caleb said, "did you call Briggs?" "Called him from the driveway. He's coming." Dale was still looking at Elena with that slightly stunned expression. He said to stay put and stay off the radio. "Good," he also said. Something shifted in his face. He said, "There's 2 vehicles parked on the logging road, near your truck. Caleb, they moved your truck. They know you were out here." The words hit the air between the 3 of them like a stone dropped in still water. Caleb turned to Elena. She was already processing it. He could see it happening behind her eyes, that rapid, unflinching assessment of a situation that he was beginning to recognize as simply the way her mind operated under pressure. She wasn't panicking. She was calculating. "They know someone found me," she said. "They don't know who. They don't know where I am right now." "They will," Caleb said. "That road leads here eventually if they work it backward." "How long?" He looked at the cut in the tree line, then back at the road. 20 minutes, maybe less if they have good people." Dale said, "My truck's not exactly invisible." "No," Caleb agreed. "It's not." He made a decision and made it fast, the way he had learned to make decisions in the field, not recklessly, but without the luxury of perfect information. "Get her in the truck. Keep the engine running. If anything comes down that road that isn't Briggs, you drive. Anywhere that isn't here." He looked at Elena. "Can you get in the truck?" "I can get in the truck," she said, and she did, pulling herself up with one hand on the doorframe and a controlled hop that kept her fractured leg clear. She made it look easier than it was. He saw the white around her knuckles on the doorframe and knew the cost she wasn't showing. He closed the door. Dale came around to him and dropped his voice. "Caleb, these people, what kind of people are we talking about?" Caleb looked at him directly. "The kind who put a device on a private aircraft." Dale went very still. "The kind," Caleb continued, "who have been running search patterns in that forest since before the official teams pulled out. The kind who knew which grid to search because they knew approximately where the aircraft went down, and they needed to confirm she wasn't alive." He kept his voice low and even. "So yeah, Dale, these are serious people." Dale was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My rifle's behind the seat." "I know. Don't touch it unless I tell you to." "Understood." Dale paused. "Lily's at my place. She woke up at 7. I told her you went for an early walk." Something moved through Caleb's chest, clean and sharp like cold water. "Thank you," he said. Dale nodded once, with the economical gravity of a man who didn't need to be thanked for the things that mattered. Caleb walked to the passenger window and knocked on it. Elena rolled it down. "Briggs is coming," he said. "When he gets here, I need you to tell him everything. Not a summary everything. Names, dates, what you documented on that hard drive. All of it. I know how to give a statement," she said. "I know you do. I'm telling you because there's going to be pressure to handle this quietly, corporately, to protect certain interests." He held her gaze. "Don't let them do that." She looked at him for a long moment. "You've thought about this." "I had 5 days of listening to a scanner while everyone told me to let it go." He stepped back from the window. "Don't let them, Elena." It was the first time he had used her first name. She noticed. The slight change in her expression registered it, filed it, but she didn't comment on it. She just looked at him with those dark, exhausted, absolutely unrelinquishing eyes and said, "I won't." He believed her. He walked to the edge of the tree line and scanned the road in both directions. Nothing yet. The cold was brutal and clear, the kind of cold that makes distant sounds travel farther than they should. And what he heard in that particular quality of silence was the absence of anything approaching from the west. For now he checked his watch, 7:49 a.m. The men who had moved his truck had a 10-minute head start on reading the terrain. If they were good, and the way they had run that search pattern suggested they would find the service road in about 12 minutes. Maybe 14. He needed Briggs in the next 8. At 7:53, a Routt County Sheriff's vehicle came over the ridge from the east, moving fast and clean, no lights, exactly as requested. It pulled off the road behind Dale's truck and Sheriff Aaron Briggs stepped out. Briggs was 57 years old, built like a man who had been a linebacker 30 years ago, and had only partially retired from that career. He wore his uniform like it was part of his skeleton, and he had a face that had made professional decisions for so long it had forgotten how to look any other way. He had been sheriff of Routt County for 16 years, and Caleb had known him for 12 of those, and the thing about Briggs was that he was the exact kind of law enforcement that Mountain Country produced, not flashy, not political, not interested in anything except what was true and what was right. He looked at Dale's truck. He looked at Caleb. "Tell me she's in that truck," Briggs said. "She's in the truck." Briggs closed his eyes for exactly 1 second. When he opened them, they were all business. Condition? Fractured fibula, frostbite on her hands and the left side of her face. Dehydrated, 5 days of exposure. Caleb paused, sharp as a tack. "Of course she is." Briggs moved toward the truck, then stopped. "The vehicle's on your logging road. 3 of them. 2 when they got there, now possibly 3. Caleb measured his words. "Aaron, the crash wasn't an accident." Briggs did not react the way most people react to that statement. He didn't ask if Caleb was sure. He didn't offer alternative explanations. He looked at Caleb with those steady professional eyes and said, "How sure are you?" "She told me herself." And she was coherent enough to reverse her space blanket orange side, so rescue helicopters couldn't spot her. Because she already knew the people looking for her weren't trying to save her. He let that land. "She's been running from them for 5 days, Aaron." Briggs absorbed this. 1 beat, 2 beats, all right, he said. "I've got 2 deputies coming in from the east. They'll be here in 6 minutes. He looked at the road. "If those vehicles make it to this road before my deputies arrive, then we have a problem," Caleb said. "Then we have a problem," Briggs agreed with the calm of a man who had decided he was going to solve whatever problem presented itself, and was simply informing the situation of that fact. He went to the truck window and spoke to Elena. Caleb stood at the tree line and listened to the forest. 4 minutes passed. He heard nothing from the west. That worried him more than if he had heard something, because the men in those trucks were good enough to go quiet when they were close, and the silence told him they were close. At 7:58, 2 more sheriff's vehicles came over the eastern ridge. At 8:01, a dark blue pickup with no markings came off the service road from the tree line, 50 yards west of Dale's position, and stopped. The door opened. A man stepped out. He was medium height, well built, wearing tactical gear that looked like outdoor gear unless you knew what you were looking at. He had the flat, evaluating stillness of someone who had been trained to assess a situation before committing to it. He looked at the 2 sheriff's vehicles. He looked at Dale's truck. He looked at Caleb. He was doing arithmetic. Caleb could see it happening. Then, without a word, the man got back in the truck. The truck reversed back into the tree line and was gone. The whole thing lasted maybe 12 seconds. Briggs appeared at Caleb's shoulder and watched the tree line for a moment. "He made us," Briggs said. "He made us," Caleb agreed. "They'll regroup, find another angle." Briggs turned back toward the vehicles. "I'm getting her to a hospital, and I'm putting 2 deputies on her room. Whatever these people are planning, they're going to find it's considerably more complicated now." He looked at Caleb. "You did good, son." Caleb didn't say anything. He was thinking about the man in the truck, the way he had stood there in that flat-eyed stillness, calculating, before retreating. That kind of retreat was not defeat. It was tactical patience. Men who operated that way did not stop because the first approach failed. They adapted, and they came back. He was still thinking about that when Briggs's deputy drove Elena to the hospital in Grand Junction, with 2 units following, and Briggs making phone calls from the front seat that reached from the Routt County Sheriff's Office all the way to the FBI's Denver field office in under 20 minutes. Caleb drove Dale's truck home. He was on the county road for about 8 minutes when Dale, sitting in the passenger seat, said, "You're thinking they're not done." "No," Caleb said, "they're not done because she's still alive. Because she's still alive, and she has 5 days of information in her head, and possibly evidence in a crash debris field that could take down people who have a lot to lose." He kept his eyes on the road. Until whatever she knows is public and documented, and beyond their reach, she's still a problem they're trying to solve. Dale was quiet for a moment. "And you," Dale said carefully. Caleb looked at him. "You found her," Dale said. "You're the one who knew where to look. You're the one who walked her out." He paused. "They saw you." The words settled in the cab of the truck, like the cold that was already leaking through the heater vents, even and undeniable. "Yes," Caleb said, "they did." He turned on the Pulaski road that led back to his property, and when he came over the last rise and saw the ranch house and the barn and the horses moving in the pasture, he felt the particular relief of a man who loves something and has been away from it long enough to understand exactly how much. The horses lifted their heads as he pulled in. The house was warm light in the gray morning. Dale's front door opened, and Lily came flying off the porch in her boots and her unbuttoned coat and launched herself at Caleb the moment he stepped out of the truck. He caught her. He held on. "Dale said you went for a walk," she said into his shoulder. "I did. That's a long walk. It was a long walk." She pulled back and looked at his face with those serious brown eyes that saw considerably more than a 9-year-old's eyes were supposed to see. "You okay, Dad?" He looked at her. He thought about the man in the truck. He thought about the 3 executives who had put a device on a private aircraft and sent a woman into the Colorado wilderness to die. He thought about Elena in that drainage with her fractured leg and her reversed space blanket, alone for 5 days, refusing to be found by the wrong people. "Yeah, baby," he said. "I'm okay." She studied him for another second, with the particular forensic intensity that she had inherited entirely from her mother, then apparently decided to accept his answer. "There's oatmeal," she said. "I made it myself, yeah? I burned the first batch. I won't tell anyone." She took his hand and pulled him toward the house. And he let her, because some things are more important than standing in a cold driveway thinking about what comes next. The oatmeal was slightly scorched on the bottom, and needed approximately twice the brown sugar Caleb normally used, and he ate 2 bowls of it at the kitchen table, while Lily sat across from him explaining, with absolute seriousness, the political situation among her class's 4-person friend group. He listened. He watched her hands move when she talked, the same way Sarah's hands had moved. He didn't touch the scanner. At noon, his phone rang. Unknown number, Colorado area code but not local. He looked at Lily. "Give me 5 minutes, Bug." She waved him off without looking up from her drawing. He stepped onto the porch and answered, "Mr. Dawson." The voice was Elena's. Rougher than it had been that morning, the medication pulling at the edges of it, but recognizably hers. "I wanted to call before they sedated me for the imaging. How are you? They're telling me the fibula is a clean fracture and should heal without surgical intervention, which is the best news I've received in 5 days." A pause. "The FBI is here. Briggs moves fast. He does." Another pause longer. "They found the hard drive, Mr. Dawson. It was in the debris field. Evidence bags. The crash investigation team had cataloged it without knowing what it was." Her voice dropped half a step. "It's intact." Caleb exhaled slowly. "The names on it," she continued. "Marcus Elroy, Reed Sutton, Daniel Fromm, my CO, my CFO, and my head of corporate legal." She said the names like she was putting them on a list she intended to hand to someone with authority to act on it. "They've been planning this for 8 months. I've been documenting for 3. The drive has emails, financial transfers, contracts with the maintenance company that serviced the aircraft, a beat. It's all there." "Then it's over," Caleb said. "The criminal portion, yes. Probably." She paused. "The rest of it is going to be complicated and loud and very public, and it's going to take months before the company stabilizes. That's a tomorrow problem." A sound that might have been a short laugh. "Yes, it is. The sound of a monitor beeping somewhere in the background. Mr. Dawson, the FBI agent handling this, Agent Carrasco, he wants to speak with you. About the men in the forest, the vehicles, what you observed." "That's fine. He'll call you this afternoon." She paused. Before they take me to imaging, she stopped, started again. I want to say something, and I want to say it before the medication takes the edge off, and I lose the nerve. Caleb waited. I've had a lot of people work for me, Elena said. Thousands over the years. Very smart people, very capable people. People I paid extremely well. Her voice was steady, but the steadiness had a deliberate quality to it, the way steadiness sounds when it's being held in place by effort. In 5 days of being hunted through a wilderness by people who used to attend my board meetings, not one of those thousands of people came looking for me in the right place. He didn't say anything, you did, she said, a man I'd never met, a man who had nothing to gain, a man who was up at 5 in the morning listening to a scanner because she stopped. Why were you listening to the scanner at 5 in the morning, Mr. Dawson? He looked out at the pasture. The horses were at the fence now, breathing cold steam. I couldn't sleep, he said. I kept thinking the mountain hadn't given you up, and that meant something. Silence. Long enough that he thought the call might have dropped. Then thank you, she said. Just that. 2 words, and in them the entire weight of 5 days. Rest, he told her. Let them fix your leg. Everything else can wait. She said goodbye and hung up. Caleb stood on the porch for a while with the phone in his hand, and the cold coming off the mountains in long, steady waves. The sky was the particular blue that Colorado makes in winter, sharp and deep and so clear it almost hurt to look at directly. His phone rang again at 2:15 p.m., Agent Carrasco. He answered, walked Dale through the morning, gave times and directions and descriptions, with the precision of a man who had spent years translating what he observed in the field into information other people could use. Carrasco asked good questions. Caleb answered them. At 3:30, Carrasco called back Mr. Dawson, he said. The 3 men in those trucks, we've identified 2 of them. Private security contractors, high-end, hired through a shell company that traces back to corporate accounts at ClearPath Energy. A pause. They've been located. We have them in custody. Caleb felt something loosen in his chest. And the 3rd truck? Still working on it. Carrasco's voice was careful. Mr. Dawson, I want to be straightforward with you. The 3rd vehicle is unaccounted for, which means there may still be an individual in the field. I'd recommend taking some precautions. Caleb looked through the window at Lily, sitting at the kitchen table with her drawing. Her dark head bent over the paper. What kind of precautions, he asked. Standard awareness. Don't be predictable about your routine. If anything feels wrong. He stopped. You're a former wilderness guide, Mr. Dawson. I suspect you already know how to trust your instincts. I do, Caleb said. He hung up and stood in the cold for another minute. The 3rd truck. He thought about the man who had stepped out on County Road 114 and done his arithmetic and gotten back in the vehicle. Tactical patience, the kind that recalculated rather than retreated. He went inside. He sat down at the kitchen table across from Lily, and for a while he watched her draw. She was making a horse. He could see. A running horse with an enormous mane that defied physics and anatomy in equal measure. And he thought about what Carrasco had said, and what it meant for tonight and tomorrow. Then he thought about something else, the piece of aircraft equipment he had found 3 days ago, near the secondary debris scatter in the Sector 12 drainage. He had picked it up because it looked wrong, the damage pattern inconsistent with impact. The metal around one connection point, discolored in a way that fire damage alone didn't explain. He had put it in his truck without knowing exactly why. Without knowing what it was still in his truck. He had told Elena about it that morning in the drainage. He had not told Briggs, he had not told Carrasco. Because this morning there had been no time. And then things had moved fast. And then he had been feeding Lily burned oatmeal and listening to a 9-year-old explain the complex social politics of 4th grade. He needed to call Carrasco back. Right now he stood up. Lily looked up from her drawing. Where are you going? Just making a call, Bug. 1 more minute. You said 5 minutes, and then you said 1 more minute, and it's been like 100 minutes. I know, I'm sorry, he paused, looked at her, Lily. If I told you that today I did something to help somebody who really needed it, and it turned out to be harder than I expected, would you be okay with that? She put her pencil down. She looked at him with those eyes that were too old for her face, and had been since she was 4 years old. Is that person okay now, she asked. Yes, he said. She's okay. Lily nodded once, satisfied, and picked her pencil back up. Then you did the right thing, she said. Obviously. He stood there for a second. Then he went to make the call. He reached Carrasco's voicemail. left a message about the aircraft component in his truck, and was back at the kitchen table in under 3 minutes. Lily didn't look up. At 4:47 p.m., exactly 12 hours after the scanner had pulled him out of his kitchen, a vehicle turned onto his private road. He heard it before he saw it. He was at the window in 4 steps. It was a county sheriff's cruiser. Deputy Michelle Okafor stepped out, mid-30s, one of Briggs's best, and she had a duffel bag over her shoulder, and the expression of someone who had been given a specific assignment and intended to carry it out without drama. Caleb opened the door. "Sheriff Briggs's idea," she said. "I'm here for the night, just as a precaution." She glanced inside the house, saw Lily looking at her with open curiosity from the kitchen table. "I was told you have a 9-year-old. I do? Good. I brought cards." She held up the duffel bag slightly. "I'm excellent at Go Fish and catastrophically bad at war." From the kitchen, Lily said, "I'm excellent at both." Okafor looked at Caleb with a trace of a smile. "I think we'll be fine." He let her in. He went back to the kitchen. He sat across from his daughter, and the deputy settled on the couch with her radio on low, and outside the window the Colorado dark came down over the mountains in its absolute and total way, and the cold pressed against the glass, and the scanner on the counter crackled occasionally, with the routine traffic of a county going about its night. Lily dealt the cards. "War or Go Fish?" she asked. "Your call," he said. She considered this with the gravity of someone making a consequential decision. "War," she said. He picked up his cards. And somewhere in the dark outside, the third truck was still out there, somewhere between the wilderness that had hidden Elena Whitmore for 5 days, and the small ranch where a single father had decided that was not acceptable. Whatever was coming, it was not finished, not even close. The card game lasted 40 minutes before Lily declared total victory, collected her winnings with the satisfaction of someone who had never doubted the outcome, and went to bed without argument, which told Caleb more about how tired she actually was than anything she would have admitted out loud. He stood in her doorway after lights out, same as always, long enough to hear her breathing slow and even out. Same as always, some rituals survive everything. He had learned that the hard way. Okafor was at the kitchen table when he came back, her radio on the counter beside the scanner, a mug of coffee she had made herself without asking permission, which he appreciated. She was reading something on her phone with the focused attention of someone not actually reading, her ears tuned to the outside sounds the way anyone trained for it tunes to outside sounds. "Quiet out there," she said without looking up. "It won't stay that way," he said. She looked up at that. Carrasco called Briggs about the aircraft component. "I know, they want it tonight. Evidence team's coming out at 6 a.m. "That's fine." He sat down the third truck. Still nothing. She set her phone down. "Caleb, I've been doing this 8 years. Contractors like that, when the operation goes sideways and the principals get arrested, most of the time the third guy ghosts. He's done. The money stopped. Most of the time," he said. She held his look. Most of the time, she agreed. He didn't sleep much. He lay in his bed and listened to the house and the land around it with the same attention he had given the forest that morning, parsing layers, reading the bottom of the sound. The wind, the horses shifting in the barn, the particular groan of the fence post nearest the east gate that had been developing a stress fracture since October. Nothing wrong, not yet. At 5:20 a.m. his phone lit up. "Carrasco," he answered before the second vibration. "Yeah, Mr. Dawson, I'm sorry for the hour." Carrasco did not sound sorry. He sounded like a man who had not slept either, and had reached the particular stripped-down efficiency that comes with that. "I need to tell you something, and I need to tell you directly, because you're in this, whether you want to be or not." Caleb sat up. "Go ahead." Marcus Elroy, Reed Sutton, and Daniel Fromm were taken into federal custody at 11 p.m. last night. They've lawyered up, which is expected. What's not expected? A pause. One of them talked, not to us, to someone else. About 4 hours before the arrest, Fromme made a call from his personal cell to a number that traces to a private security firm in Dallas. The conversation was 40 seconds. What was said? "We don't have the content. We have the connection." Another pause. "The Dallas firm has 3 employees currently listed as active in Colorado." Caleb stood up. He was at Lily's door in 6 steps without consciously deciding to move. She was asleep, exactly as he had left her, one arm over her face. He exhaled. "Okay," he said into the phone. "What do you need from me?" "I need you to do exactly what I'm about to tell you without argument." "Depends on what you tell me, a beat." "Fair enough." Carrasco's voice adjusted. I need you and your daughter at the Root County Sheriff's Station by 7 a.m. We're moving Ms. Whitmore to a secure facility today, and her testimony begins tomorrow. The faster we get this into the formal record, the less value there is in." He stopped, chose his words, "in removing anyone who can corroborate her account." Corroborate her account, meaning Caleb. He processed this with the same flat calm he had processed everything since 4:47 yesterday morning, because the alternative to flat calm was panic, and panic had never once in his life improved a situation. 7 a.m., he said. 7 a.m. He hung up. Okafor was in the hallway. She had heard enough to understand the shape of it. She had her jacket on and her hand near the radio. "How long to wake her up and get her ready?" Okafor asked. 8 minutes, he said. "She sleeps in her clothes half the time anyway." "Then go. I'll watch the road," he went. Lily woke up the way she always woke up, fast, fully. Sitting upright like sleep was a switch and someone had flipped it. She blinked at him, standing in her doorway at 5:25 in the morning, and said, "Again?" "We're going for a drive," he said. "Where town?" "We're gonna stay with Sheriff Briggs for a little while." She read his face. He knew she was reading his face because she got very still the way she got still when she was doing it. And then she said, "Is this about the person you helped yesterday?" He had not told her anything. He had not mentioned Elena Whitmore's name. Had not told her what had happened in the forest. Had not said a word beyond that vague answer at the kitchen table. His daughter had been piecing it together from scripts the way she pieced everything together. "Yeah," he said. "It is okay," she said, and got up. No argument. No drama. 8.5 minutes later, they were in Okafor's cruiser, heading west, on County Road 114 in the pre-dawn dark. And Lily had her drawing pad on her lap and her boots untied, and was apparently unbothered by any of it, which simultaneously filled him with pride and broke his heart a little, in the way that parenting alone tends to break small pieces of you that you don't expect. They were 4 miles from the county line when Okafor's radio went sharp. "Okafor, this is Briggs." "What's your 20?" she picked up. "County 114, 4 miles east of Hayden. Dawson and daughter aboard. En route to your location." A pause. Then Briggs, "Increase your speed." Now Okafor didn't ask why. She pressed the accelerator. Caleb looked in the side mirror. Headlights. 2 vehicles. Back on the road. Maybe 3/4 of a mile behind them. Not using their lights until just now. Which meant they had been running dark and had either turned the lights on by accident or had decided that subtlety no longer served them. He said, "Lily." "I see them," she said. She said it with a 9-year-old's attempt at calm that nearly destroyed him. "Get down between the seats. Keep your head down. Don't move until I tell you." She slid off the seat without a word and folded herself into the space between the front and back seats, and he heard her breathing deliberately in that small space, slow and controlled, and he thought, "She gets that from Sarah." And then he stopped thinking about that because Okafor was on the radio calling in pursuit, and the vehicle behind them was accelerating. "How far back?" Okafor said. "Half mile." Closing, he turned in the seat. The headlights were gaining. "They're faster than us. Backup is 8 minutes out. They'll be on us in 3. She grabbed the radio again. "Briggs, I need units now. 114 eastbound." "Already moving," Briggs said. "Keep driving." The 2 vehicles behind them closed the distance with the focused urgency of people who had made a decision and were past the point of reconsidering it. Caleb watched the headlights grow in the mirror and felt something cold and very clear settle into the center of his chest. Not fear. Beyond fear. The functional state that comes when the situation has escalated past the point where emotion is useful. He looked at Okafor. "If they pull alongside, I know," she said. "You have to protect the girl first." She looked at him for 1/2 second, full eye contact. And what passed between them in that half second was an entire conversation that neither of them had to say out loud. "I know what I'm doing, Caleb." He faced forward. The vehicle behind closed to a 1/4 mile. Then, headlights appeared coming the opposite direction on 114, 2 sets, moving fast, and Okafor said, "That's Briggs," with a certainty that turned out to be exactly right. 2 sheriff's cruisers came over the rise ahead of them and took up positions bracketing the road, lights going now, and behind Caleb's cruiser the 2 pursuing vehicles, slowed and then stopped and then, in the particular way of people who have calculated their odds and found them insufficient, began to reverse. They were 50 yards into their reversal, when 2 more sheriff's vehicles came over the ridge behind them. The reversal stopped. It was over in less than 90 seconds. Both vehicles pulled to the shoulder. Both drivers were out and on the ground before Briggs's people had their doors open, which told Caleb something about the professional training involved, and also something about the realization those men had reached very quickly about the precise level of commitment of the law enforcement currently surrounding them. Caleb opened the back door. Lily, she climbed out from between the seats. Her drawing pad was still in her hand. She looked at the stopped vehicles and the cruisers and the deputies, and then she looked at her father. Those were the bad guys, she said, matter of fact. Like she was confirming something she had already decided. Yes, he said. And now they're caught. Yes. She looked at the cruisers and the stopped trucks for another moment. Then I dropped my pencil, she said, and climbed back in to look for it. Caleb stood outside the cruiser door and felt something move through him that he had no immediate name for. He thought it might be relief. He thought it might be gratitude. He thought it might be the accumulated weight of 36 hours releasing itself all at once through a single point of contact, which was the sound of his daughter looking for her pencil between the seats and announcing when she found it. Briggs walked over. He looked at the stopped trucks, then at Caleb. Third contractor, Briggs said. He was in the lead vehicle. Is he talking? Not yet. He will. Briggs looked at him steadily. It's done, Caleb. The third vehicle's been the one thing we couldn't close off. Now we have him. A pause. It's done, Caleb breathed. The sky to the east had the first thin line of pre-dawn color, that cold gray blue that the mountains make before the sun decides to commit. The road was blocked in both directions by law enforcement, and neither direction felt threatening for the first time since 4:47, the previous morning. Lily appeared at his elbow with her pencil and her drawing pad, and looked at the lightening sky. Dad, she said. I'm hungry. Yeah, Bug, he said. Me too. At the sheriff's station, Agent Carrasco was waiting with coffee that was better than anything Caleb had made in the past 2 days, and a look of controlled relief that told Caleb the man had been carrying the third truck problem as his own specific weight since the previous night. They shook hands. Carrasco gave Lily a deputy's sticker badge, which she accepted with the dignity of someone who felt she had perhaps earned it. Caleb gave his full statement on record, everything from the scanner at 4:47 a.m. to the aircraft component in his truck, which 2 federal evidence agents had already retrieved from the ranch that morning. He described the men in the forest, the vehicle on County Road 114, the 2 pursuing trucks. He described what Elena had told him in the drainage and on the phone. He described it all with the precision of a man who had learned long ago that the difference between useful information and useless information in an emergency was specificity. Carrasco listened and asked questions and recorded everything. At 9:15 a.m., Carrasco set down his pen. The hard drive, he said. We've pulled everything. The emails between Elroy, Sutton, and Fromm go back 11 months. The financial transfers to the maintenance contractor, who tampered with the aircraft, go back 7. He looked at Caleb directly. This was not an impulsive act, Mr. Dawson. This was an 11-month plan executed by 3 people who believed they had thought of everything. They didn't think of the drainage, Caleb said. No, Carrasco leaned back. They modeled every probable exit path from the crash site based on the injury profile they anticipated and the terrain data they had. Their projections had Ms. Whitmore moving northwest toward the official search area, where they had people positioned. He paused. The drainage is a geological anomaly. It doesn't appear on any digital terrain model produced in the last 15 years because the satellite coverage in that sector was obscured by cloud during the relevant survey window. Caleb thought about that, the drainage that had hidden Elena for 5 days, the drainage that didn't appear on modern maps, the drainage he had found by walking the land, because that was how he had spent the last 12 years not looking at maps, but walking. They had the technology, Caleb said. Yes, the wrong kind. Carrasco looked at him. Yes, the wrong kind. He seemed to want to say something else and then apparently decided the point had been made clearly enough without further elaboration. At 11 a.m., Caleb's phone rang. The number was one he didn't recognize, but the Colorado area code was different from the hospital. He answered, Mr. Dawson, a voice he didn't know. Male, measured the kind of smooth professional tone that came from years of managing other people's crises for a living. My name is Victor Hale. I represent ClearPath Energy's board of directors. Caleb said nothing. I understand you were instrumental in locating Ms. Whitmore, Hale continued. On behalf of the board, I want to express our gratitude and— Mr. Hale, Caleb said. Yes? Before you finish that sentence, I want to make sure we both understand something. He kept his voice even. I'm sitting in a sheriff's station right now. I've been giving a federal statement for the last 2 hours. Whatever you're about to offer me, money, reward, gratitude on behalf of the board, whatever form it takes, I'd like you to know that the answer is no. And I'd like you to know that this conversation is probably going to be mentioned to Agent Carrasco in about 4 minutes. A pause. I see, Hale said carefully. The people on your board who arranged to kill your CEO are going to federal prison. The evidence that will put them there is already in federal custody. Whatever ClearPath's interests are right now, they're not my concern. He paused. Is Ms. Whitmore recovering well? Another pause, longer. Yes, she is. Good, that's all I needed to know. He hung up. He sat for a moment. Then he went and told Carrasco about the call. Carrasco wrote it down without expression, but something around the edges of his face suggested he found it privately satisfying. At 12:30 p.m., a hospital number called. Elena's voice was less rough than the day before the medication, he thought, or simply the distance from 5 days of raw exposure. But it was still the same voice, stripped down, honest. Not performing anything. I heard about this morning, she said. County Road 114. News travels. I have an FBI agent in my room, Caleb. Everything travels. She paused on his name the same way he had paused on hers the previous morning. In the drainage, noticing the shift, accepting it. Are you all right? Is Lily? She's in the break room eating a granola bar and teaching a deputy how to draw horses. A real sound this time. Not the ghost of a laugh, but an actual one. Brief caught quickly. Of course she is. A pause. Caleb. Victor Hale called you. He did. I'm sorry. I told the board not to. They don't always. She stopped. Restarted. I know what he offered. I told him no. I know you did, Carrasco told me. She was quiet for a moment. I want you to know that whatever happens with the board and the company and the legal process, none of that is the thing I'm thinking about right now. What are you thinking about? She took a moment. He could hear the monitor in the background, steady and even. I'm thinking about the fact that you came into that drainage alone, she said, at 6 in the morning, in 11-degree weather, after 5 days of everyone else deciding I was dead. And that when you found me, the first thing you did was hand me a protein bar without making a speech about it. She paused. I've built a company that employs thousands of people. I have 12 lawyers on retainer and a security team and a communications department. And the thing that kept me alive in that drainage was a space blanket and the decision not to quit. And the thing that got me out was a man who walked into the right place because he had spent years paying attention to the wrong things. Caleb looked at the wall of the interview room. The wrong things, he said. The things nobody thought mattered, she said. Old trails, animal paths, the direction snow falls on a particular ridge. Another pause. I want to ask you something, and I want you to give me an honest answer, not a polite one. All right, do you miss it? The guiding? He hadn't expected that question. He sat with it for a moment, the way he sat with questions that deserved to be sat with. Yeah, he said finally, I do. Why did you stop? My wife died, he said. It came out without the weight it used to carry. Not lighter, exactly. More settled. Like a stone that had been carried a long way and then placed down. Lily was 5. He stopped. She needed me home. And now she's 9, Elena said. He said nothing. She's 9, Elena said again carefully. And it sounds to me like she's also extraordinary. He thought about Lily sliding between the seats without argument at 5:25 a.m. Lily finding her pencil afterward. Lily teaching a deputy to draw horses. She is, he said. Then I think she might be ready, Elena said. For whatever you need to be ready for. He didn't answer that directly, because it touched something he hadn't been ready to touch in 4 years. And he wasn't sure he was ready to touch it now. In an interview room in a sheriff's station, with a granola bar-eating 9-year-old down the hall. Rest, he said. That's what you need to be doing. I am resting. I'm horizontal, and I have a titanium rod scheduled for tomorrow morning, and I have nothing to do but make phone calls, so I'm making phone calls. She paused. Thank you, Caleb. For not letting them win. He thought about what that meant. For not letting them win. 5 days alone in a drainage, reversing a space blanket, moving every 12 hours, doing the arithmetic of survival without anyone to help her do it. She had not let them win either, not for one single hour of those 5 days. You did most of it yourself, he said. The last part needed help, she said. They said goodbye. He sat in the interview room alone for about 3 minutes. Then the door opened and Lily leaned in wearing the deputy sticker on her coat, holding a granola bar that was not her first of the day. "Deputy Torres says you can probably go home now," she said. "They caught the bad guys." "Deputy Torres is right," he said. "He also says you're some kind of hero." Caleb stood up. "Deputy Torres is exaggerating. He says you went into the mountains by yourself in the dark and found that missing lady." "I went for a walk, Dad." She looked at him with those eyes. "It was dark and it was 12 degrees and you were alone." 11 degrees. That's not the point and you know it." She crossed her arms. A gesture he recognized in his bones. Her mother. God, her mother. "You did a hero thing." He walked to the door. He put his hand on the top of her head, which she tolerated with only mild protest. "I kept a promise," he said, "that's all." She considered this. "Same thing," she said. They walked out of the interview room together, and at the front of the station, Dale was waiting with his truck keys and a thermos of real coffee, and the expression of a man who had been keeping a very large number of concerns to himself for the past 24 hours, and was only now allowing himself to release them. He looked at Caleb. He looked at Lily. He did the visual inventory of a man confirming that the things he needed to be intact were intact. Then he held out the coffee. "Get in the truck," he said. "I made brisket." Caleb took the coffee. He looked at Lily, who was already moving toward Dale's truck, with the energy of someone to whom brisket represented the final and absolute confirmation that everything was going to be all right. He followed her. They drove home on County Road 114, in the winter morning light, the mountains steady on the western horizon, the road empty and clean. 3 miles from the ranch, Lily looked up from her drawing pad. "Dad," she said, "yeah, the lady you found. Is she going to be okay?" He looked at the road, at the mountains, at the sky. "Yeah," he said, "she is." Lily nodded satisfied and went back to her drawing. She was adding to the horse now, giving it wings, which defied the realistic tradition she usually maintained. But he decided this was not the moment to bring that up. Dale drove. The scanner on Dale's dashboard crackled once, twice, and then settled into the quiet routine of a county going about its ordinary morning. And for the first time in 6 days, Caleb Dawson let himself believe that ordinary was something he was allowed to have again. He was wrong about that, not in the way he feared, not in the way the dark part of him still half expected when the phone rang at unexpected hours or headlights appeared on the road at night. But Elena Whitmore was going to call him again in 3 weeks with a proposal that would require him to answer the question she had already asked once, the one he hadn't answered directly. "Do you miss it?" And Lily was going to find out the full story of what had happened those 6 days, not from him but from a news report that showed a photograph of the drainage and the mining trail and the county road, and she was going to come to him that night, very seriously, with her drawing pad, and show him something she had drawn. A man walking into a dark forest alone, and in the forest a light. He was going to look at it for a long time. Then he was going to tell her it was the best drawing she had ever made, and he was going to mean it, but that was 3 weeks away. Right now there was brisket and Colorado daylight, and his daughter drawing a winged horse in the passenger seat, and the mountains outside the window doing what mountains do, which is simply to be there, enormous and indifferent and absolutely permanent. The same as they had been before any of this happened, and the same as they would be long after. He put his head back against the seat. He closed his eyes. He slept. He slept for 11 hours. He didn't mean to. He sat down on the couch after the brisket, intending to rest for 20 minutes, while Lily finished her drawing at the kitchen table, and the next thing he knew it was dark outside, and Dale had put a blanket over him at some point, and gone home, and Lily was asleep down the hall, and the scanner on the counter was doing its ordinary quiet work, and the house was exactly as it should be. He lay there for a moment without moving, listening. Wind, horses, the fence post with the stress fracture, doing its thing in the cold. Nothing wrong. He got up, drank a glass of water, checked the doors, checked Lily, and went to bed properly. He slept again, straight through until 6 a.m., which was something he had not done in longer than he could accurately remember. When he woke up the second time, something had shifted. Not in the house, not in the land around it, in him. He lay in bed and tried to identify it, the way you try to identify a sound you heard in the boundary between sleep and waking, and what he finally settled on was this, for the first time in a very long time. The first thing he thought about when he opened his eyes was not the things he had lost. He thought about the drainage, the reversed space blanket. Elena's voice in the dark, rough as gravel, asking him how many of them there were. Her hand on his arm when she stood up. He thought about Lily between the seats, breathing deliberately. He thought about what Elena had said on the phone. The wrong things. The things nobody thought mattered. He got up and made coffee and stood at the kitchen window in the early light. And the mountains were there the same as always. And for the first time in 4 years he looked at them, without the grief being the first thing he felt. It was still there, it was always going to be there. But something else was there now too, sitting right alongside it, without pushing it aside, just existing in the same space. He thought Sarah would have found that acceptable. 3 weeks passed. They were strange weeks, in the particular way of weeks that follow something large. The media discovered him on day 2, which he had anticipated and prepared for by not answering the door to anyone he didn't recognize, and letting Dale handle the 2 reporters who came up the private road with the confidence of people who believe professional persistence is a virtue. Dale handled them with the efficiency of a man who had been working cattle for 40 years and had a very clear sense of what constituted trespassing. Carrasco called on day 4 to tell him that all 3 ClearPath executives had been formally charged. Federal counts, the kind that didn't offer much daylight between the charging document and a significant number of years in a facility none of them had ever imagined for themselves. He also confirmed that the aircraft component from Caleb's truck had been analyzed and matched definitively to the device that had caused the fuel line explosion. Physical evidence, on top of the digital evidence on the hard drive, on top of 3 contractors now talking in exchange for deals. It's a complete case, Carrasco said. I want you to know that. What you found in that truck matters. I didn't know what it was, Caleb said. That's usually how it works, Carrasco said. The people who know exactly what they're looking for often find less than the people who are just paying attention. Lily came home from school on day 6 with a newspaper someone had left in the classroom. She put it on the kitchen table and pointed to a photograph on the front page without saying anything. It was an aerial photograph of the Routt County wilderness, the search zone, the drainage, the mining trail, the county road. A red line traced the path Caleb had walked in the dark, and another line traced the path he and Elena had taken out. He looked at the photograph for a long time. Then Lily turned it over so the photograph faced the table and said, I want you to tell me what actually happened. He looked at her. All of it, she said. I'm 9, not 4. So he told her. Not everything, there were things that would wait until she was older, and things that were not his to share, but the shape of it. The scanner at 47 a.m., the drainage, the space blanket reversed orange side-in, Elena's fractured leg and her sharp eyes, and the 5 days she had spent alone making decisions that kept her alive. The men in the forest, County Road 114 in the dark. Lily listened without interrupting, which was not her default mode, which told him how seriously she was taking it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. She reversed the blanket so the helicopters wouldn't see her, Lily said. Yes, because she knew the helicopters might be working for the bad guys. She didn't know for certain, but she was careful. Lily absorbed this. She's smart, very. And you found her because you walk around in the woods all the time. I walk around in the woods, yes, and because you listen to the scanner. And because of the scanner. She nodded slowly, working through the architecture of it, placing each piece where it belonged. Dad, she said, if you hadn't been up at 5 in the morning, listening to the scanner, she would have died. He held her look, probably. So the scanner matters. The scanner matters, and walking around in the woods matters. Yes. So all the stuff you do that seems like you're just doing stuff, it actually matters. He almost smiled. That's about right. She thought about this for a while, with the serious, concentrated expression she got when she was integrating new information into her existing model of the world. Then she got up, went to her room, came back with her drawing pad, and sat back down at the table. She opened it to the drawing she had been working on in Dale's truck. The man walking into the dark forest, and in the forest the light. She turned it to face him. He looked at it. Best one yet, he said. She tore it carefully out of the pad and put it in front of him. Keep it, she said, already opening to the next page. He picked it up. He looked at it for a moment. He put it on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a Colorado license plate that had been there since before Sarah died. 3 weeks after the drainage at 10:15 on a Thursday morning, Elena called. Not from the hospital number, from a personal cell he didn't have saved. He almost didn't answer it. "It's me," she said when he picked up. "I know," he said. He did know immediately from the first syllable. He was not sure what that meant, and elected not to examine it closely. "How are you?" she asked. "Fine, you. The titanium rod is working. I have a walking boot and a physiotherapist named Gerald who is unreasonably cheerful for a man whose job involves inflicting controlled pain." A pause. "I'm working from my apartment. The company is." She stopped. "Complicated right now, I imagine. The board is restructuring. Half of them are trying to protect ClearPath's public positioning, and the other half are trying to protect their own positioning within the board, which are not the same thing, and I'm sitting in a walking boot trying to manage both while the FBI is still making calls that complicate the timeline on everything." She paused. "It's fine. I've managed complicated before, you have. I want to ask you something," she said. He had known this was coming. He had known it since she asked the first time, in the hospital, and he hadn't answered directly. "Go ahead," he said. "I'm setting up the Whitmore Wilderness Rescue Foundation." Her voice shifted to something more careful, more deliberate. "Formally, we're filing the paperwork next week. The mission is improving rescue operation protocols for wilderness emergencies, specifically in high-altitude terrain where current technology has significant gaps, training programs, communication infrastructure, and a field research component that would essentially map and document exactly the kind of terrain knowledge that—" She stopped. "That you used?" Caleb looked at the refrigerator. "At Lily's drawing." "Go on," he said. "I want to ask you to lead the field program," Elena said. "Not as a figurehead, not as a public relations element. As an actual program director with actual authority over how the field research is conducted and how the training protocols are built." A pause. "You would hire your own team. You would set the methodology. The foundation would be fully funded. I've committed $30 million personally, and we have corporate commitments bringing it to over 60. Another pause. "And before you say anything about the money—" "I wasn't going to say anything about the money," he said. She stopped. "You weren't?" "No. I was going to say that I need to think about it. A beat, okay, and that I'd need to understand what it means for Lily. Practically, that's completely reasonable. She's at a school she likes. She has Dale. She has a routine that works." He paused. "She's had enough disruption, I know." Elena's voice was careful but not cautious. There was a distinction, and she observed it precisely. The Foundation's primary field office would be in Denver. You could maintain the ranch property. We'd fund a base of operations there as well, given that it's its H's to the primary terrain. You wouldn't have to choose between the life you've built and the work. He hadn't expected that. The way it was structured, not requiring him to abandon what existed, but extending from it. He stayed quiet, working through it. "Caleb," she said. "Yeah. When I asked you before if you missed the guiding, you said yes, I remember. I know that what happened to Sarah is the reason you stopped. I'm not pretending that this fixes that, or replaces anything, or that it should." Her voice was steady. "But I think you stopped because Lily needed you home, and I think she still needs you. But I also think she needs you to be the version of yourself that doesn't go to sleep at night with something unfinished in your chest." The words hit him somewhere he hadn't prepared for. He was quiet for a long moment. "She said something like that to me," he said finally. "Not in those words, but something like that. She's 9, Elena said. And extraordinary. You said so yourself." He looked at the drawing on the refrigerator. The man walking into the dark, the light in the trees. "Let me talk to her," he said. "Of course, and Dale." "Naturally, I need 2 days. Take a week," she said. "Take whatever you need. I'm not going anywhere." A pause. "I mean that literally. Gerald won't clear me to fly until the fracture consolidates." Something loosened in him, almost a laugh, not quite. "I'll call you in 2 days," he said. "Okay," she said. And then, in a different register, not the business voice, not the managed voice, but the voice she had used in the drainage when she was running on 5 days of pure will and didn't have anything left to waste on pretense. "Thank you for picking up. You had my number," he said. "I know, I wasn't certain you'd answer. You called at a reasonable hour," he said. "And you've earned the right to a callback." He hung up. He stood in the kitchen for a moment. Then he did something he had not done since the week after Sarah's funeral. He went out to the barn. He saddled the older mare, the steady one, the one he had ridden every day for 7 years and then barely touched in 4. She regarded him with the calm patience of animals, that have decided their humans are fundamentally well-intentioned, but occasionally incomprehensible. He mounted up. He rode east, toward the tree line at a walk. The cold was present, but not brutal, the kind of cold that sharpens everything at the edges, rather than shutting it down. The pasture was hard underfoot. The mountains were where they always were. He rode to the tree line and stopped. He sat on the horse at the edge of the forest and looked into it. He thought about 5:20 in the morning, 6 days ago, walking into those trees in the dark with a pack and a compass, and a certainty he couldn't justify to anyone, including himself. He thought about what he had found, not just Elena. That too, but not just that. He thought about what it had felt like to move through terrain he knew with a purpose that mattered, to read the land the way it was meant to be read, to have the years of walking and watching and paying attention to the wrong things cash out, in a moment when it was the only thing standing between a woman and the decision everyone else had already made about her. He thought about going home at 5 in the morning and finding Dale in the kitchen and seeing Lily's horse stickers on his phone and feeling, for the first time, that the gap between the man he had been and the man he currently was might not be as permanent as he had thought. He turned the horse around. He rode back to the barn, untacked the mare, brushed her down, and went inside. He called Dale. Dale picked up on the second ring. "You're going to take the job," Dale said before Caleb said anything. Caleb stopped. "I haven't said. I've known you for 12 years, Dale said. You saddled the mare." Caleb looked at the window. "I haven't decided anything," he said. "Right," Dale said. "How's the mare?" "She's fine, good. She needed the exercise." A pause. "Caleb, I'm 63 years old and I have been your neighbor and your friend and your daughter's unofficial grandfather for 4 years, and I'm going to tell you something I should have told you 2 years ago." His voice was different now. The accordion neighbor dryness was gone. What was left was the other Dale, the one that existed underneath. Sarah would have already taken the job. Caleb didn't say anything. She would have been on the phone that first night saying, "Cal, you found her because of everything you are, and that matters, and you can't put that back in a drawer." Dale paused. "You know I'm right," he knew. He had known it in the abstract for a while. Hearing it said out loud in Dale's voice, in this kitchen, with Lily's drawing on the refrigerator, was a different thing. "She liked the mountains," Caleb said. His voice was steady. "She loved the mountains," Dale said. "She also loved you in the mountains. She used to tell me that the version of you out there was the most alive version of you she'd ever seen." A beat. "I'm not saying she'd want you to forget her." "I know what you're saying, Dale." "Good." A pause. "Take the job. I'll look in on the horses when you need to be in Denver." "I haven't decided, right." The dryness was back. "Call me when you've decided." He hung up. He was at the kitchen table, looking at nothing in particular, when the front door opened at 3:45 p.m. and Lily came in from school, with her backpack hanging off one shoulder and mud on one boot that was not on the other boot, which suggested a specific story he would hear in full detail at dinner. She dropped the backpack, looked at him. "You rode the mare," she said. "How do you know that? You have horse on your jacket." She sat across from him. "And you have your thinking face." "I have a thinking face?" "It's the one where you look like you're watching something happen that other people can't see." She pulled her backpack toward her and started unloading books. "What are you thinking about?" He looked at her, at the drawing on the refrigerator behind her. "Miss Whitmore called," he said. Lily stopped unloading. "She offered me a job," he said, "working with a rescue foundation, teaching people how to navigate wilderness terrain. The things I know how to do." Lily was very still. "It would be based in Denver," he said partly. "We'd keep the ranch. You'd stay at your school." She looked at the table, then at him. "Would you be gone a lot?" she asked. "Sometimes. I'd be honest with you about when." She absorbed this. He watched her do it the same way she had absorbed everything the past week, with a seriousness that was both heartbreaking and absolutely right. "Dad," she said, "do you want to do it?" He held her look. "Yeah," he said, "I think I do." She nodded slowly. "Then you should do it. It affects you too, Lily." "It's not only I know." She looked at him steadily. "But you saved her because of who you are, because of all the things you know how to do." She paused. "You should keep doing those things. You're good at them." He sat there. "And I'd be fine," she added. "Dale's right there. And I'm basically capable of most things on my own now." "You are not basically capable of most things on your own. I made oatmeal. You burned the first batch. The second batch was fine. She pulled out a textbook and opened it with the decisiveness of someone who has made a decision and is now moving forward. "Call her back, Dad." He looked at her for another moment. Then he took out his phone. He found the number, he called it. She picked up on the second ring. "That was fast," Elena said. "2 days was too long," he said. "The answer's yes." A pause. He heard her exhale, not loudly, but audibly, the sound of a breath that had been held at a controlled distance for 2 days, and was now allowed to release. "Okay," she said. "I have conditions, tell me. I build the program my way. The methodology is mine, agreed. Lily's school doesn't change. Her routine stays stable, agreed, and I'm not a spokesman. I'm not a press story. If the foundation needs a public face, it's yours." A pause. "Caleb, Lena." Another pause, then agreed. She said it differently than the first two. "Not negotiated. Accepted, then yes," he said. "I'm in." "Good." Her voice had something in it now that hadn't been there before. Not quite warmth, she wasn't a warm voice by nature, any more than the drainage had been a warm place. But something real in it. Something that didn't require performance. "I'll have the Foundation's legal team send the framework documents tomorrow. You'll want to have someone look at them. Dale will." A short pause. "Dale reads legal documents? Dale reads everything. He's retired, he has time." The not quite law again. He was getting good at hearing it, the particular sound of Elena Whitmore, amused against her will. "Wednesday," she said. "I'm flying to Denver Wednesday to meet with the Foundation board. I'd like you to be there. I'll be there. Bring Lily," she said. "If she wants to come." He looked at his daughter across the kitchen table, working through her homework with total apparent concentration. Her mud-caked boots swinging under the chair. "I'll ask her," he said. He already knew what she'd say. He hung up. He sat at the table for a moment, then Lily. She looked up. "You want to come to Denver Wednesday? Meet Miss Whitmore in person?" She stared at him for approximately 1.5 seconds. "Obviously," she said, and went back to her homework. He put the phone down. He looked at the refrigerator. At the drawing, the man, the dark forest, the light. He thought about the scanner at 4:47 a.m. that had started all of this. He thought about Sarah putting it on the counter 12 years ago, saying, "We keep that on. Always." He thought about the way large things sometimes pivot on the smallest choices, a scanner left running, a road walked instead of driven, a protein bar handed to a stranger without making a speech about it. He thought about Elena reversing the space blanket. Not giving up, not for 1 hour of 5 days, in 11-degree weather with a fractured leg and no one coming. He thought about what it meant to refuse to accept what everyone else had decided. The scanner on the counter crackled once, routine traffic. Nothing urgent. He left it on. He got up to start dinner. And somewhere in Denver, a woman with a walking boot and a titanium rod, and 5 days of wilderness survival in her recent past, sat in her apartment and looked at the Foundation documents on her laptop and felt, for the first time since the aircraft controls had gone wrong over northern Colorado, that the thing she had been building for 14 years still had a future. Not despite what had happened, because of it. Because a man with a cracked screen phone, and a compass, and a daughter who asked hard questions had walked into the dark at 5 in the morning and refused to come back without her. She picked up a pen, she signed the first document. And 300 miles north, a rancher put a pot on the stove, and his daughter brought her homework to the kitchen table, and the scanner did its quiet work on the counter, and the mountains were where they had always been, and everything that came next was still ahead of them, waiting to be walked into. The way all things worth finding are in the dark. Before dawn, when everyone else has gone home, Wednesday came fast. Caleb drove to Denver with Lily in the passenger seat, and Dale's thermos of coffee wedged between the center console and his right knee, which was exactly how all important journeys in his life had begun quietly, with decent coffee and someone he loved in the next seat. The drive was 3.5 hours. Lily spent the first hour on her drawing pad, the second hour asleep against the window, and the third hour asking him questions about the Foundation that told him she had been thinking about it considerably more than her homework expressions had suggested. "How many people will you teach?" she asked, somewhere past the Eisenhower Tunnel. "Don't know yet. We're still building the program." "Will you go out into the field yourself?" "Some. Mostly I'll be training other people to do it." "So you're like a teacher, something like that." She thought about this. "You'd be good at that," she said, with the casual certainty of someone who had watched him explain things her entire life and had formed a settled opinion on his competence. "Thank you," he said. "I'm not saying it to be nice." I'm saying it because it's true. She went back to her drawing. Mom would say the same thing. He kept his eyes on the road. He had learned over 4 years not to brace against those moments. The bracing made it worse. The moments came when they came, simple and direct, the way Lily handled everything without drama, without apology, as an observation about what was true. Yeah, he said, she would. They arrived at the ClearPath Energy headquarters building at 10:50 a.m., 10 minutes early, which was something Caleb had not managed to do for a non-emergency event since Lily started first grade. The building was glass and steel, and exactly what you'd expect from a $3 billion company in Denver's financial district. And Lily looked at it through the windshield, with the expression she reserved for things she was deciding how to feel about. Big, she said. It's a big company. Does it feel weird? That she runs all this, and you found her between two rocks? He parked. He looked at the building. A little, he admitted. Lily unbuckled her seatbelt. Don't let it, she said, and got out of the truck. He sat there for 1 second, then followed his 9-year-old into the building. The lobby was all polished concrete and living walls, and the particular quiet of expensive real estate, and the woman at the reception desk smiled at them with professional warmth and said, "Miss." Whitmore's assistant would be right down. Caleb stood with his hands in the pockets of his good jacket, the one he wore to anything that was not a ranch or a forest, and felt Lily standing very straight beside him, taking in the space with her serious brown eyes. It smells like a hotel, she said quietly. New buildings do, he said. The ranch smells better. Most places do. An elevator opened and a young man in a pressed shirt came across the lobby. Introduced himself as Marcus, not the Marcus currently in federal custody, which was a detail Caleb's mind touched briefly and moved away from and led them to the 14th floor. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows and a table that could seat 20, and currently seated 8 people Caleb didn't know, all of whom were looking at him with the particular combination of gratitude and curiosity that he had been getting from people for 3 weeks and had not yet worked out how to comfortably receive. Elena was at the end of the table. She stood when he walked in, which he hadn't expected, and the walking boot on her right leg made the motion deliberate and slightly effortful, and she did it anyway with the same controlled economy she had used to drag herself out from between 2 boulders in a drainage at 6 in the morning. She looked different, clean, composed. Dark blazer, her hair pulled back, the frostburn on the left side of her face faded to a faint pinkness. She looked like the photographs of Elena Whitmore that existed before any of this had happened. Except for the eyes. The eyes were the same, not the photographs. The drainage, Caleb, she said. Elena. He shook her hand. Her grip was the same as it would have been before 5 days in the wilderness, which was to say, precise and unequivocal. She looked at Lily. Something shifted in her face. Not the business expression, not the composed executive expression. Something more undefended than either. You must be Lily, she said. Lily looked at her for a moment, with the full forensic attention she had clearly been saving for this encounter. You reversed your space blanket so the helicopters couldn't see you, she said. Elena blinked. Yes, that was smart. It was the only option I could think of at the time. That's usually what smart is, Lily said. Thinking of the thing when you have to. Caleb watched Elena take that in. He watched the thing it did to her expression. Your father says the same thing, Elena said, not in those words. We think alike, Lily said, and sat down at the conference table with the confidence of someone who has been invited to a meeting and intends to be present for it. The next 2 hours were the business kind, foundation documents, program structure, timelines. The people around the table were a mix of foundation attorneys, ClearPath board members who supported the initiative, and 2 former search and rescue coordinators Elena had hired as consultants. Caleb asked the questions that mattered and didn't ask the ones that didn't, which earned him a look from Elena about 40 minutes in that he couldn't quite categorize, but that felt like recognition. Lily sat at the end and drew in her pad and said nothing unless someone addressed her directly, at which point she answered with a clarity that made the attorneys exchange glances twice. At the 1-hour mark, one of the board members, a man named Garrett, who wore his money the way some men wear cologne, everywhere, and slightly too much, leaned forward and said, Mr. Dawson, I want to be candid with you about something. Go ahead, Caleb said. There are members of this board who believe the Foundation's primary value is reputational. For ClearPath, given the circumstances of the past several weeks, he spread his hands. The story of how you found Elena is extraordinary. From a public narrative standpoint, Garrett, Elena said. I'm being honest, Elena. He deserves to know the conversation that's been happening. Then be honest about all of it, she said. Her voice was even. Tell him the part where I told the board that if this foundation becomes a press strategy, rather than an operational program, I pull my personal funding and rebuild it independently. The room was quiet. Garrett leaned back. She did say that, said one of the attorneys, with the dry neutrality of someone keeping an accurate record. Caleb looked at Elena. She met his look and said nothing, because she had already said what was necessary. I appreciate you telling me, Caleb said to Garrett. And I'll tell you what I told the man who called me, from your legal team, 3 weeks ago. I'm not a story. I'm a program director. If that's what you're hiring, I'm in. If you need someone for press, he shrugged. You know where to find a PR firm. Garrett studied him. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. Fair enough, he said. Caleb looked at Elena. She was looking at the table, but the corners of her mouth had moved slightly. The meeting ended at 1:15 p.m. Most of the board members cleared out efficiently, the way people with full schedules clear rooms. The two search and rescue consultants stopped to talk with Caleb in the kind of specific, detailed way that told him immediately they were the right people. For this they spoke in terrain, in protocol gaps, in the precise language of people who had done the work and knew where it failed. He made mental notes and asked follow-up questions, and felt something turn over in his chest that he identified after a moment as the particular engagement that comes from problems that are worth solving. Lily had moved to the window and was looking at Denver from the 14th floor, with the assessment of someone forming opinions she would share at dinner. Elena appeared at Caleb's shoulder when the consultants moved on. Walk with me, she said quietly. They walked to the end of the room near the windows, away from the last few people organizing papers at the table. Elena moved well in the boot, better than 3 weeks should have allowed, which suggested Gerald. The physiotherapist was either very good, or Elena was the kind of patient who treated physical therapy the way she treated everything else, as a problem with an optimal solution that she intended to find. Garrett will come around, she said. It doesn't matter if he doesn't. It matters to the board dynamics. It matters to the board dynamics, he agreed. It doesn't matter to the program. She looked at him. You're not going to find this world easy to navigate. The corporate side of it, probably not. He looked out the window at the city. Is that a warning? It's a fact. She paused. I'm saying it because I want you to know I'm aware of it. That I'm not going to pretend this is a simple arrangement. You're going to spend time in rooms like this one, with people who see things very differently than you do. I spent the last 12 years on a ranch in Root County, he said. I know how to be in rooms where people see things differently. She was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about something, she said, since I got back. What? Before the crash, I had built a very specific kind of life. Very controlled, very insulated. She kept her eyes on the city. I thought control was the same as safety. I thought if I managed every variable, I could prevent bad outcomes. A pause. Then 3 people I had personally vetted and trusted for years put a device on an aircraft, and I ended up between 2 boulders in a drainage that doesn't exist on modern maps. He said nothing. Control isn't the same as safety, she said. I knew that intellectually. I didn't know it the way you know something when your body has been through it. She turned to look at him. The drainage taught me that the only real security is adaptability. Knowing how to read what's actually in front of you, rather than what you expected to find. That's a hard thing to learn at 11 degrees, he said. Most of the important things are hard, she said. They stood in silence for a moment. Outside the window, Denver moved in its ordinary midday way, indifferent to the 14th floor conversation above it. Caleb, she said, can I ask you something personal? You can ask, Sarah, she said the name carefully, without weight or performance. When did it stop being the first thing you thought about in the morning? He hadn't expected that. He stayed with it honestly. About a week ago, he said. Something moved through her expression. Was that she stopped, restarted? Was that okay? Yeah, he said. It was okay. He looked at the window. She would have wanted it sooner. Elena was quiet. She used to say that grief was just love, with nowhere to go yet, he said. Her words, she read a lot. He paused. I think she was right. I think eventually it finds somewhere to go. Doesn't disappear. Just moves. Elena said nothing for a moment. Then, quietly, I've been thinking about trust, she said. The same way, maybe. When it breaks badly enough, it doesn't go back to what it was. But maybe it goes somewhere. He looked at her. Maybe, he said. From across the room, Lily's voice. Dad, there's a food truck outside. Can we go after this? Caleb turned. Lily was pressed against the glass, looking down at the street below with binocular focus. What kind? He called back. Looks like tacos. He looked at Elena. There are 6 restaurants in this building, Elena said. She wants the food truck, he said. Elena looked at Lily at the window. Something in her face did the thing it had done when Lily first walked in that undefended thing. The one she didn't control and probably didn't know was visible. I know a good one, Elena said, 2 blocks west. Caleb looked at her. You know the food trucks in this neighborhood. I know everything in a 6-block radius of this building. I've worked here for 9 years. She picked up her jacket from the chair. I haven't actually left the building for lunch in approximately 18 months. He picked up his own jacket. Well, he said, it's a good day to start. The 3 of them rode the elevator down and walked out into the Denver cold, Elena in her walking boot, moving at a pace that was determined rather than fast, Lily between them with her drawing pad under her arm. Caleb, with his hands in the pockets of his good jacket, and they walked 2 blocks west on a Wednesday afternoon in January, while the city went about its ordinary life around them, and found the food truck, which was, in fact, exceptional. They ate tacos standing at a counter along the building wall, which Elena did without comment, which told Caleb something about the woman she was choosing to be on the other side of what had happened to her. Lily ate 2 tacos and pronounced the third one inferior to the first 2, and then asked Elena, directly and without preamble, the question she had clearly been holding since the conference room. Were you scared? Lily asked. In the forest. Elena was quiet for a moment. Not the managed quiet, the real kind. Yes, she said. Every day. But you kept moving. I didn't have another option. Lily thought about this. Dad says that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing the thing anyway. Elena looked at Caleb. Your father's right. He's right about most things, Lily said. He's wrong about the oatmeal, though. Brown sugar is not excessive. Caleb said, I said approximately twice the amount that was reasonable. It was the correct amount, Lily said firmly. Elena was looking at the 2 of them with an expression that Caleb would only understand fully later, months down the road, when he had learned to read her the way he had learned to read the forest. Not by thinking about it, but by being present in it long enough that the language became natural. She was watching them the way someone watches a thing they had not known they were missing until they saw it. He drove home that evening, with Lily asleep in the passenger seat, her drawing pad in her lap, Denver disappearing in the rearview mirror, and the mountains reassembling themselves on the horizon as they climbed back into altitude. He thought about the meeting, about Garrett and the attorneys, and the 2 consultants who spoke in the right language, about the documents he had signed, which committed him to something real, something with weight and consequence, and the kind of scope that required more than one person and more than one season to build properly. He thought about Elena standing at the 14th floor window, saying control isn't the same as safety, with the flat certainty of someone who had learned it the hard way and intended to use it. He thought about the drainage, the reversed blanket, the protein bar, the moment she had taken his arm. His phone buzzed on the seat beside him. He glanced at it, at a red light. Elena, a text. It said, thank you for today, both of you. He typed back one-handed, the taco truck was your idea. 3 seconds, her reply. Everything good starts somewhere small. He put the phone down. He drove. Lily stirred against the window without waking. He adjusted the heat so it was warmer on her side. He turned the radio down, already low, to nothing. He drove through the dark with the mountains on the horizon, and his daughter asleep beside him, and the whole shape of the next thing waiting ahead of them. Not like something to be afraid of, but like terrain to be walked 1 foot in front of the other, with attention, in the direction of the light. 6 months later, the Whitmore Wilderness Rescue Foundation ran its first training cohort. 14 wilderness guides, 8 former military, and 4 search and rescue coordinators from 4 different states came to Routt County for 2 weeks and learned to read land the way Caleb had learned to read it on foot, in conditions, with their eyes and their bodies, rather than their screens. He built the curriculum from the ground up, starting with the things that had actually mattered in the drainage, terrain pattern recognition, natural shelter identification, movement signature analysis, the things no satellite had caught, the things that lived in the knowledge of someone who had walked the same ground 100 times in all seasons and all weather. On the last day of the cohort, Elena came to Root County. Not with a security team, not with an assistant. She rented a car in Denver and drove herself, which was the kind of detail that by now, Caleb had come to accept as simply characteristic. She arrived at the ranch in the late afternoon, in boots and a practical jacket, her walking boot replaced by a normal shoe, the fracture consolidated and Gerald's work completed. Lily ran out to meet her before Caleb could even get to the door. He watched them from the porch. Lily talking immediately, pointing at the barn, apparently explaining something about the horses with great urgency. Elena listening with her full attention, her eyes on Lily's face, asking follow-up questions that Lily responded to with increasing enthusiasm. Dale appeared at Caleb's shoulder. He had been coming by more in the past 6 months, for reasons he didn't explain and didn't need to. Well, Dale said. Don't, Caleb said. I'm not saying anything. You were about to. I was about to say that the horses look good, Dale said with perfect innocence. They do look good, Caleb agreed. Elena looked up from her conversation with Lily and found Caleb on the porch. She raised a hand, he raised one back. The late afternoon light came off the mountains, in the particular gold of that hour in Colorado, and it touched the yard and the barn and the fence line and the horses and Lily still talking, still gesturing, already pulling Elena toward the barn to meet the mare properly. Elena looked at the barn, then back at Caleb, a question on her face. He nodded. She let Lily lead her in. He stood on the porch with Dale and the mountains behind them and the scanner doing its quiet work inside the house. And he felt the full weight of everything that had arrived in the 7 months since a cracked screen phone had lit up at 4:47 in the morning with words that told him the world had given up on a woman he hadn't yet met. He thought about what giving up would have cost. He thought about all the things that had to be true simultaneously for that morning to go the way it did. The scanner Sarah had put on the counter. The 12 years of walking land nobody else thought to walk. The 9-year-old asleep down the hall who asked him hard questions and expected honest answers. The particular quality of stubbornness that had never let him accept what everyone else had decided. He thought about Elena in the drainage, not the photographs, not the 14th floor, not the woman who ran a $3 billion company. The woman between the boulders in 11-degree dark, asking him to prove he was alone, eating half a protein bar in one bite, standing up on a fractured leg because lying down was not in her. 2 people who had refused to quit, that was all it had been. That was everything it had been. Dale went home at sundown. Caleb made dinner. Elena ate at the kitchen table with Lily, who had appointed herself the authority on who sat where and what they talked about, and managed the conversation with the organizational confidence of a much older person who had simply never been informed that 9-year-olds were supposed to be less certain of themselves. After dinner, Elena helped with the dishes without being asked, which Caleb noticed without commenting on. Lily went to bed and submitted to lights out without the usual negotiation, which told him she was tired in the best way, the way you get tired, when a day has been full of the right things. He stood in her doorway after she said, without opening her eyes, I like her. I know, he said. She listens, Lily said. Not like she's waiting to talk. Like she actually wants to know. She does, he said. Good. Eyes still closed. That's important. He pulled the door mostly shut. Elena was on the porch when he came out, looking at the mountains in the last of the dark, the stars coming out over the tree line, the cold settling in the way Colorado cold settles completely, without apology, with a kind of absolute authority. He stood beside her. They didn't say anything for a moment. There was no need to. 6 months of phone calls and meetings and building something together had created the kind of comfort that doesn't require filling silence. And they stood in it, out with discomfort. 2 people who had come through something that had changed the shape of them both. She said, I listen. Elena said, Lily, she told me. I used to not, Elena said. I used to hear information. It's different. She looked at the mountains. I've been different about a lot of things. Good different or hard different. Both, she said. The good kind and the hard kind are usually the same thing. He looked at the mountains too. The Foundation's first cohort finished today, he said. I know. I read the report on the drive up. What did you think? She was quiet for a moment, the real quiet. I thought that if a program like this had existed 7 months ago, the search teams might have found that drainage. She paused. I'm glad it didn't exist yet. He looked at her. If they'd found me on day 2, she said. None of this, she stopped. Gestured slightly. At the ranch, the mountains, the porch, the direction of the kitchen, where dinner had just happened. He understood. None of this, he agreed. They stood there. The stars came out fully. The horses shifted in the barn. The scanner inside the house crackled once, twice, routine and ordinary, and exactly as it should be. He thought about 4:47 in the morning, 7 months ago, standing at the kitchen counter with a coffee mug halfway to his mouth, hearing the words that told him the world had decided to stop looking. He had not stopped. He would never be able to explain why, not to a reporter, not to a foundation board, not to anyone who hadn't spent years learning to trust the thing the land tells you when you're quiet enough to hear it. Some of it was skill, some of it was stubbornness. Some of it was a 9-year-old who had asked him once if he would always help someone who needed it, and expected an answer he would keep. And some of it was Sarah putting a scanner on a counter 12 years ago and saying, "We keep that on always," in the specific voice of a woman who understood that the difference between being ready and not being ready was the decision you made before the moment arrived. He had kept it on. He had been ready. And the rest of it, Elena, the foundation, the first cohort, Lily leading a billionaire to meet a horse, dinner around a table that had been too quiet for 4 years, all of it had walked in through the door that decision had left open. He went inside. He turned the scanner up slightly, not because he expected anything, but because that was simply what he did. He left the porch light on, he went to bed, and the mountains stood where they had always stood, enormous and indifferent and permanent, and the scanner did its quiet work. And somewhere in a guest room, down the hall, a woman who had survived the wilderness slept, without the particular tension that had lived in her body for 7 months. And in the next room, a 9-year-old with her mother's jaw and her father's stubbornness slept with her drawing pad on the bedside table. And a single father lay in the dark and felt, fully and without reservation, that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Not because it had been easy, not because it had come without cost, but because he had refused to stop when stopping was the reasonable thing to do. And that refusal had saved more than one life. It had rebuilt his own.